Got a year 12, this is Ms. Meg, so I kind of got a request, or I think I've asked, there's no videos for inflation, so I thought I'd give it a go. And I just realised that when I look at the board, I think this is kind of like, it's like opposite, so I hope this helps. Otherwise I might start doing those ones where you just capture the screen, but I don't have a pen to write on, so I don't know. Let's see how this goes. So I wanted to do the quantity theory of money today, so QTOM, which is what that is backwards, is the quantity theory of money. And that is looking at the relationship between things like the amount of money in circulation and how that affects the price level. So there's like saying too much money chasing too few goods is inflation. That's the idea of too much money, it's going to cause prices to rise. And hopefully today I'll kind of give you an idea of why that is and why sometimes that doesn't happen. So the quantity theory of money is literally an equation. It's called the theory of exchange, the equation of exchange or something like that, whatever. This is an equation that's trying to teach you about what causes inflation in an economy or deflation. And so you have M for the money supply. Okay, so M stands for the money supply. V stands for the velocity of circulation. P stands for the price level. And Q equals real GDP. Sometimes it's called output, but it's real output. And really kind of like a way, I don't know if it's ever occurred to anyone who's looked at this to think about it, is this here, this side is AD. So amount of money in circulation times how many times people are spending it. So spending, that's about spending. And this is kind of about like output and production. So that's about AS. And so it's saying that your AD has to be equal to your AS. You don't need to know that, but it might have occurred to you if you kind of thought about it a bit. The amount that you're spending needs to be equal to your total output. Therefore, that's AD equals AS. But we're not talking about ADS today. We're just looking at, could we talk about these variables and predict what's going to happen to the price level if there's a change, and like talk about why the price level might not go up. It's quite common to link it to the business cycle, to talk about the different stages of the business cycle and what kind of inflation you would get and why. Or like if something like government spending was to increase the different stages in the business cycle, what that would do to the level of inflation. And it comes back to this equation. So really what you kind of understand is that it's an identity. So not a mathematician, but basically means that it must balance. You can't have, say, an increase in this side and then it not be offset by an increase in this side. So an example of that is, just to take this away, if the money supply, say the Reserve Bank suddenly let loose all this money in the economy, like they printed some more money or something like that, and it was to increase by, say, 10%, and there was no change in V, and you sort of like write like a little thing here or above it to say no change, then you have to get an increase here of 10%. And that means either the price level increases by 10%, or the amount of real GDP increases by 10%, or it could be split between them. So together, they equal an increase of 10%. So that could be that maybe the price level goes up 5 and real output goes up 5, and that equals 10 in total. Is that right? Yeah, 5 plus 5, yeah. So kind of saying that if there's any change in this side, it has to be met by an equal change in this side. Alternatively, it could be that the price level goes up by 10% fully. That means that there's been no change in output whatsoever, just that prices have gone up. And that makes sense. If there's more money circulating around the economy, everybody's got more money, then how do we decide who gets the limited amount of goods and services? Because there is at any one point in time a finite level of goods and services. So the way we decide who gets it is who can pay the price. And so if everyone's got the same amount of money, or like we've all got more money, we have to up the price so that those with more income, more money can afford to buy it, and those who can't don't get it. And that's how you ration goods and services. I'm not saying it's an equitable thing to do, but that's like how modern economies work. You've only got like a certain amount of stuff. Those who can pay more get it, and those who can't don't. All right. I'm just doing a talk. I don't want to be interrupted. Sorry, there was Mr. Laney interrupting me. So I want to finish this. Where was I? So yeah, so you could have 10% increase in the money supply, and that would have to be lead to a rise of P and Q by 10%, or individually one of them could go up 10, one of them could go up 8, and the other one would go up 2, so that together it equals 10%. And the idea is that, I probably didn't say it earlier, that this is M times V, the money in circulation times how many times it's changing hands, so how many transactions, is equal to the price level times output. Okay. What else do we need to explain here? So a common thing is that you first get assessed on understanding that idea, that if there's a change on one side, there has to be a change in the other for it to balance. There's like this old thing where they thought when they first invented this, the Skyberg and Fisher first invented this like theory, that if you increase the money supply, it would have to lead to inflation because V was apparently constant and so was Q, or V was relatively predictable and Q was constant. This is like an old thing, but it's just that idea of like balancing, that if you kind of say, well, if M increase and if we assume that V isn't going to change, so there's no change in V and there's no change in Q, that means you don't produce more goods and services, then you have to get an increase in the price level, and that's inflation, because an increase in the price level is inflation. However, we kind of realize now that actually that's not true, that if you increase the amount of money in the economy, that actually could lead to, people go out and spending, that could lead to more being produced, which means that you don't need to increase the price level, or you don't need to increase it as much. So it's kind of like, there's a lot of scenarios going on here, all right? So if we're looking at, it's a lot of if, all right? If the money supply was to increase, what could happen that could just completely change all this is that maybe the velocity of circulation would decrease by 10%. So that means it doesn't need to be a change on the other side, because if you can see that balances each other out. Alternatively, it could be the amount of money in the economy increases, but maybe some households save some of that increased money. So what could happen is that V decreases by, say, 2%. So these like transactions, like how many times people are spending in the economy. So if people are saving, they're spending less, so V would decrease by 2. So that means that this side of the equation would still need to increase, but only by 8%. And that could be that the price level goes up 8%. Alternatively, it could also be that maybe real GDP increases by, say, 5%, and then the price level only needs to go up 3. So there's a lot of ifs, and it's kind of like you kind of pondering, well, if this happens, that could lead to this. Alternatively, it could also listen to this. And it's just you running through the different scenarios to show this idea of how they must balance. All right, if there's a rise on one side, it needs to be balanced on the own side. So here an increase, then that needs to either go down, or there needs to be a change over here. Something to kind of just go through, just again, these variables. So the price level is the average price level. So on the ADS model, it's the vertical axis. So the price level, which means inflation, deflation, disinflation. Real GDP is like how much output we've got there, we've produced in a given year, the final value adjusted for inflation. So we've held prices constant to see if we've actually produced more or less. And just this interesting thing, could be AS together, but also P times Q is nominal GDP. So if you think about it, when you take out the P, that's why you end up with real GDP. And then V is literally spending. It's how many times like $1 is changing hands, going for the till and then it's being spent again, going for the till, being spent again and again. And when you talk about things like lower interest rates or like people wanting to spend more, that's what affects the velocity of circulation. Usually we say the Reserve Bank is the only one who controls the money supply. Now, I didn't want to have a very long video, so I kind of want to sort of throw something out there because I also have to go soon. So if we think about what we can use this for, one is to kind of go like, there was like, what if KiwiSaver contributions increase? So if KiwiSaver contributions increase, right, that's going to lead to a decrease in V. If you're increasing your KiwiSaver contributions, you can't spend as much. So that's going to cause V to decrease. And so that means that either M needs to increase to offset that fully, or there needs to be a decrease on this side to balance the equation. So if there's less spending, prices have to fall, or less needs to be produced to balance the equation. And what we often, I haven't said it, is a proportional, like you use the words proportional. So if B was to increase, say, 5%, then M also increased by 5, then that's an exactly proportional increase. So it means that there's no change in this side of the equation because it's been met by a proportional increase in M. Alternatively, if it was only to increase by 2%, that's a less than proportional increase in M. So therefore, we need to have a change on this side because we still have 3% that needs to be offset. So that could be that maybe Q decreases by 3. Okay, so that means it's a less than proportional response, but that's okay because M has also increased by 2. But by decreasing by 3%, it fully offsets the decrease in V by 5. Okay, so that's just running that through how you talk about a change in one of the variables. The other thing that this equation is often used to talk about is the business cycle. Okay, and so the business cycle, you might remember, looks like a graph. That is a graph. You've got plus, minus, and this is real GDP percentage change. When it's positive, it sort of looks like this. This is like just like randomly drawing it. So here's like a little bit of a boom. So when you're on the upside near the top of the cycle, it's a boom. Just to go through it quickly. When you're at the top, it's a peak. You know, if this was to peak up here, that would be the peak. Here's a recession. Recession is 2 quarters of negative economic growth. So it has to be below the 0x, 0. It needs to be below 0. It needs to be 2 quarters of negative real GDP growth. When you're coming down the slide, that's what we call a downturn. And when you're starting up on the positive, that's a recovery. There are different names for this. You know, a really long recession is like a depression. The trough is the bottom. So there's some upswings when you're on the up. There are different names for it, but it's just looking at where your economy is at in terms of your level of percentage increase in real GDP. And what that means for your economy. So like when you're in a boom, well, everything's like gung-ho, lots of jobs, lots of spending, inflation's really high. So yeah, whereas a recession, not a lot of jobs, not a lot of spending, inflation's like actually deflation probably. So getting back to the quantitative theory of money, a really popular question is to talk about, I don't know, like an increase in the money supply, like say, compare and contrast the effect of the government doing like I don't know, like spending more, increasing it's not quite, but say they increase the money supply by spending more in the economy. Sort of loosely, this is how it works. It's not entirely accurate, but let's just go with it. So if you think about it, if we presume that increasing the government spending would lead to an increase in M, okay, so M here, how would that inflect the price level or inflation when you're in a boom as opposed to a recession or sort of similar to that? And so what we're looking for is in a boom, there's little spare capacity. So if the government was to inject, like think circular flow, inject a huge amount of government spending into the economy in a boom, we would say that's probably going to be quite inflationary because when you inject a large amount of money into the economy and you're unable to increase the Q, right? So this is what we're talking about. So if that increases quite a lot and we can't really increase Q because we don't have a lot of unemployed people, we don't have a lot of unemployed resources, there's little spare capacity, then all that's going to happen is that the price level is going to go up. Either fully, so exactly proportionate to the increase in M, in this case, government spending, or Q may increase only a little, and so that means that there does need to be a relatively large increase in the price level to fully offset the increase in M. And that's inflationary. And that's why in a boom, if there's more injections into the economy through like export receipts, government spending, investment, it does tend to lead to quite high inflation, or why you have high levels of inflation, because you've got all this money chasing not enough goods and you can't produce enough goods to meet it. So it's the idea about Q not able to increase. Either it can't or it can only increase a little. In a recession, the opposite is true. In a recession, you have high unemployment, so lots of spare resources, and we say there is lots of spare capacity. So if the government was to inject, let's talk billions of dollars into the economy in a recession, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, then what would happen is they would be able to increase Q by quite a lot, So in this here, M increases by quite a lot. Q could potentially increase like by the same amount, so that's 10%. That could also increase by 10% because you have a lot of spare resources and you're able to increase production to meet that increased demand, more or less. If the price level does need to go up, it might only increase a little bit, say like 2%. So a less than proportionate response to the increase in M, if I was just saying 10, while Q is able to increase by a lot more, say 8%, so together they fully absorb the increase in money. And that's why in a recession, if the government does spend more money, it doesn't lead to inflation. If it does, it's only a very small increase in the price level because of the idea that you're able to increase Q to offset the increase in M. So I hope you found that helpful. I keep on getting interrupted, so I'm just going to end this now. And if I've got time tomorrow, I'll make a couple more videos. I had impacts requested. Okay, ka kite.